Okay, I think we are good to go. Most of our participants have joined, so I think we can start in right about now. So, all right, everyone, welcome to our second live AMA session that we are doing today. So, we're extremely happy to welcome our speakers for our second live AMA session, Mr. Swaroop Hegde and Mr. Anomit Ghosh. So, Swaroop and Anomit are the co-founders of BlockVigil, which is a blockchain-based company towards helping making the developer experience as simple and smooth as possible. Now, to talk about our speakers, both are computer science graduates from Manipal Institute of Technology and have a wide array of experiences in the tech world. And we are extremely delighted to have them today. So while talking about Swaroop Hegde himself, he has kickstarted several startups in the past, including Atticus and Dota Pro Hub, while Anomit has tons of experience as a leader and mentor, having worked at several companies in the past, including SAP and the popular fitness app CureFit. And on a personal note, they have been my mentors while I was part of their bootcamp, and have helped me learn quite a lot in the world of blockchain itself. So on behalf of the Hack Club NMIT core team, I extend a warm welcome to our speakers who are here today. And we're delighted to have you on board for our second AMA session.
Thanks for the intro, Aditya. Good to be here. Looking forward to all the questions. Yeah, I don't think I've had that intro in a long time. Just a minor correction, I'm actually not a graduate of Manipal Institute of Technology. I did study there, but I had dropped out, so officially I'm not allowed to say I'm a graduate. But for all purposes, I did study there. So that's how I met
Apologies on our behalf then.
No worries. At the same time, it's also not a sign to most people who are studying at NMIT and everywhere else. That's not the route you should be taking. It's just something I chose as a personal decision 12 years ago.
I think we can talk about that towards the end of the session as well.
Yes, absolutely.
So starting off with our first few questions, we would like you to yourself speak a little about BlockVigil and what the mission is about and what it's trying to really do.
Sure. Let me give a brief intro, and then I think Anomit can sort of talk about, from a developer perspective, why we're doing it. So personally, to me, this is something, I experienced a personal issue about health issue about 3 years ago. I was traveling back to India. I believe I was in Italy, and I got something called, dengue fever, which everybody in India at least is aware of. And very similar, ironically, very similar to coronavirus, you don't have a cure. I believe there's a vaccine, but obviously very few people get vaccinated, and your only choice is to get better. So while I'm getting my blood test done, I get so there's this count, your platelet count that you're monitoring, and you have to go to a clinic. They basically run basic tests and just let you know. And that actually led to me getting really ill because they had tampered with my data, right? So that is not something I was expecting, and I found out the hard way. Fortunately, lucky I got better, but the week after that, I started, dabbling into how do I solve this using blockchain. So I had already been working around it. So unfortunately, healthcare is a much harder problem to solve. As you guys get into it, you'll sort of know. But I'm a developer myself, so I realized what if I can actually build a platform that whoever is working, it shouldn't be just restricted to healthcare, right? It should be for every other systems. And I thought that this is the next thing. So which is where we are now seeing as the world moves more and more into the blockchain space. And I recruited my my now co-founder, Anomit. So he was on a tech hiatus, and he'll talk a bit more about it. And we both started this company on January 1st, 2018. And our mission has not changed, which includes, our recent successes with, people like Aditya, who have gone on to go from what we call as a zero to a hero. And we call him our bootcamp hero. That's our first title we have given him. But, that's our goal. How do we get, whether you're an existing web developer, whether you're a student, how do you sort of build on blockchain in under 5 minutes? That's our mission. But I'll let Anomit get into, give a bit more on that.
Hey guys, Anomit here. I actually missed the first 2 minutes when Aditya was speaking. I was trying to figure out how to get this headset working. So Aditya had me in the hackathons and stuff like that. I usually use a clip-on microphone. Uh, so
Yeah,
I hope my voice is clear now because I was
yeah,
trying
it
to
is. It's very clear.
set it up. Okay. So we're just talking about, I guess, how we got started with BlockVigil and the motivations behind it, I'm guessing, right? So
Yep,
just like Swaroop, I am also a graduate of Manipal Institute of Technology, uh, MIT. People over there like to call it that way. And so I studied computer science. And um, so what is basically at the very foundation of whatever we have created until now is this one common shared goal of building things that are very resilient, things that should be resilient, things that are open, and something that should be available to anyone because given the number of people who are participating in computer science and IT programs throughout the country and people getting hired in even related fields, things should get easier, not tougher, is what we actually believe in. And that's what got us working on it. Like Swaroop said, that he had a problem with his health data that got tampered, and he started figuring out that what was going on with the blockchain world is this common trait of, you know, trust but verify, right? Don't trust blindly, uh, especially coming from society and a culture like Indian culture. You tend to place way too much trust in people and institutions way more than what any human being should, right?
right.
So,
Yeah,
right. So yeah, talking about me, I was on the tech hiatus for about half a decade or so. So because it was kind of a burnout issue, whatever you want to call it. I was working while I was already in college for Swaroop, and 2008 and 9, like those were my second, third years in college, and remote internships. Now you know about it, but I was already working with Computer Sciences Corporation (CSC) for a remote internship back then, and this was just like things were just like opening up in terms of enterprises are adopting open source. So I was kind of
right,
roped in to implement this security stack. So the whole thing which AWS abstracts away right now, the proper login details, you SSHing into a remote terminal, things like that. These actually have to be secured by the right security certificates. Like
correct.
our daemons, they have to be secured against outsiders' IPs coming in. So I was working on automating that. So that was my first remote internship. So the second one was me working with Swaroop, which actually became like a full-time work by my last semester, right? So last semester we were supposed to do an full-time internship somewhere. So I chose to work with Swaroop, and after that, I was working at SAP Labs in Bangalore from 2010 to 12. That's where I got to learn about business processes and systems. They have to follow certain standards, how many rules and regulations they need to follow. And you, as a software engineer, if you're developing on them, you can totally forget about having a casual hello world kind of approach to programming, right? So
Right,
most people are not prepared for those kind of things. So anyway, I was working with that. My specialization was in the backend for something called SAP Business Suite. So Business Suite has its own data models, data objects, and having to process them in the correct life cycle and coordinate with the user interface that SAP has of its own, because SAP has its own tech stack. They do not at
right,
all rely on any outside vendors. No, it's just a strict no. They run their own version of Unix, their own programming language, their own programming runtime that comes with its own kernel that fits into that modified Unix that they have been running since, I guess, the 1970s, right? So I got to see how important it is to keep things very tightly knit together so that there's no deviation when you implement solutions across different customers. And we want to bring that with BlockVigil as well. So I try to bring that kind of approach even in what we offer to you as developers, right? Yes. that's like a little bit of what I've done so far.
I
Right. Thanks
think
so much, Anomit, for that.
those are the learnings, Anumit sort of brought in. Like literally when I pitched him on the first day, I was
Yeah.
talking about blockchain and I was saying, hey, I have this idea. So this is not, again, this is like, a week before we are like starting to code and we are just thinking about what needs to be built. And so for me, my vision is to build it like, so just like any other web API, right? Like whether it's Twilio or Stripe. So the idea is you bring your business logic and then we will help you sort of put that on blockchain like any other web app, right? So something
Right.
Aditya you personally experienced, and so Anumit has seen that from an enterprise level, which is which is much more complex than what we hackers do, right? So we like to tinker around with
Correct.
it, but that's sort of the goal.
Got it. I think that gave us a great idea into the whole, building and making of BlockVigil itself. Another thing that we wanted to talk about right in the beginning itself that could probably even help a bit with the beginners and stuff is about the boot camp, which has been very successful, and thankfully I was able to be a part of it itself. What was your, kind of inspiration behind starting it, and what has been your experience with it so far?
Uh, so the original, I think the original idea, this was before COVID because I had just gone back to San Francisco. This is, I would say, early February. And Anomit was in touch with the university, right, with NMIT. And
Okay.
I don't believe it was through your Hack Club. It was through something else. But he had come and presented. And then I believe some of the professors, somebody had gotten involved, and the HOD or somebody, I don't exactly remember. He can
Right.
probably
Yeah.
give the details. So we were supposed to figure out a way that we could directly work with universities like yours. And essentially, somebody would come and teach either if we don't have the bandwidth, and we would remotely, we would either, of course, remotely, as in what I mean is like through Slack and all these communication tools, and then we would come in like once in a week or something like that, come in like do an in-person thing, right? We had also, I believe, tried to tie up with some sort of teaching sort of institutes. So they're not institutes, they're like trainings coaches of sorts. So they basically run and they sort of train people to come in before they come and join the company. Like they very quickly go through. So you could call it a boot camp in a way, but they run it almost like a
Understood.
full-fledged course. So and then COVID hit, and I pretty much like on the last minute flight, I flew back to India. And 3 days later, they had completely shut down all flights. And a week later, we were on complete lockdown. So the challenge for us was like, now how do we do in-person events? Because you sometimes do need to show demos, right? And you do need that
Correct.
in-person connection. But the advantages are developer tools can be used by anyone, right? Anumit and me have worked remotely more in this timeline of this company because of me being on the other side of the world. It's only in the past year or so that we've spent in the same city and the same location, right? So we thought we can now actually take this to a whole another level by opening up, doing it like a formal boot camp. But that meant that we would have to dedicate our time completely, right? Because we would have to ensure that the quality was high. So
Right.
we made a very, very quick decision. I believe it was 24th, the lockdown was in place in India, and we announced it literally the next day because we didn't want to waste a single day. So ironically, I
Okay.
picked April 1st, being one of these, it's usually used for April Fools. And I knew this year nobody like attempted that because everyone was like very, very dead serious about things. Also, Gmail
Yeah.
was actually launched on April 1st. So little fact, unrelated fact. So we decided we're going to just start the bootcamp instead of coming up with a very formal process and stuff. So we just went with it, right? So as you joined, like you were in the first cohort, just to everybody else watching, we are actually just started our third cohort. So I kind of wish we had this done a week ago. It would be nice to get you guys in if you were interested. I will decide and see if we can still sort of let some of you in if someone's really, really interested. As Aditya knows, it is very
Yeah.
fast paced. You cannot, I don't want to go into the details of bootcamp stuff right now, but I, once you have missed 2 sessions, you're kind of out, right? Like that's our rule. So we came up with that rule, and I think Anumit can touch on why it's called a boot camp. Unlike everybody who calls it now like a Zoom session, and so many, it's overused now. So that was our
Definitely.
thing,
Yeah.
right? How do we get people like you? How do we get developers to be more engaged? We had already launched a product, in January with the tutorials launched, and a lot of people had tried it out. I think a bunch of university students had also I think we had 70, 75 signups. That is something very hard to do because this is a new thing, right? So then we thought, let's teach a bit more, let's teach some concepts, and then how do we take you from not knowing anything to actually building real things, right? Whether it's a hackathon, whether it's going beyond. And I think you should be telling more of that story. But before that, Anomit can jump into why we call it a hackathon, why we call it a bootcamp.
The idea is very simple, guys. What we started figuring out is one of the things that I saw changing in the last 10 years is the attention span of people, right? And it's like maybe I'm just showing my age over here, but it's just completely unacceptable, people. Like not being able to focus and maintain your attention span over a space of couple of hours, like that's the key to learning something new, right? And if you're not
Yeah,
going to be able to
absolutely.
do it, and if your friends, family do not enforce that behavior, guess what? I'm going to hammer it back into you. The boot camp comes from how the phrase originally originates from, right? If you know where it comes from like a military kind of setting, right? But you do need some sort of a little bit of a harshness sometimes to know that the things where you are, you kind of need to step it up to a different level, and like being answerable to a schedule, being answerable to tasks, and just prioritizing execution over anything else. You need those little periods in life which will teach you something. So we wanted to bring that model, and that's why we call it a boot camp, right? And uh, yeah, like Aditya knows even better about how the process goes on, right? And I'm pretty
Yeah.
hard on the people who participate in it, right? Which kind of separates out the serious folks from the serious folks. Like if you're really like dying to learn something new, you wouldn't mind going through a little bit of discomfort, right? And I'm talking about a mental discomfort. It's not like I'm asking you to do 100
Right.
sit-ups or something, right? And yeah, my background also, like when I was on my tech hiatus, I was actually studying and learning and teaching a lot of different forms of martial arts, fitness. That's one professional work also I've done in that area, and I found out that there is a lot to learn from there as well. Like one of the biggest um, misconceptions, especially nowadays, it happens that if you just spend all your times in a virtual world, you will get better at it, but you have to draw inspiration from real life. Like by real life, I mean like
Absolutely. Yeah.
your body, you understanding what other people, empathy, right? Having some empathy, and you cannot have an empathy because if you spend all your time in a virtual setting, you are missing out on literally like 99% of the human existence, and all your all your complexity of your biological systems. Like if you really are passionate about computing, you should definitely be passionate about the computing that goes on inside your own systems. They are also working as a system. If you really study deep into it, it's the same encoding, it's the same decoding, uh, uh, error corrections, redundancies,
Yeah.
feedback loops, positive feedback loop, negative feedback loop. It's a like properly well functioning system, right? So yeah, trying to get that people's mindset was our motivation to call it a bootcamp.
And I think the whole hustle system, personally having been a part of it, I can say is a wonderful, approach to it because it gets you in the groove. It makes you, sit down every day, spend some hours and get going. And I think you mentioned about martial arts and wrestling. We can get into that as well towards the end of the session, ask you something about that too. And now over to our core team lead over here, Abhishek Bhaiya, to continue the questions.
Hi Swaroop, hi Anomit, thanks for joining in. So my name is Abhishek. I will be the co-host with Aditya for today's session. So a bit background about myself. I'm a fourth year. I have been into blockchain space for about an year now, and I do have experience of building the apps. So we have a presentation created for you where we have listed all the. Yes, can we have the presentation? So we can start with our AMA.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so the first question for you is, what do you think is the biggest bottleneck in the blockchain space right now?
I think it's the learning curve. It is probably the most complex thing into something that is supposed to be world changing. If you're trying to change the world and you make it really, really hard for newcomers, that beats the purpose, right? So I think that's precisely why we started the company, right? How do we make it at least easy for developers? But this is not just restricted
Yeah.
to people building on blockchain. It's also people using. So that's kind of our other goal that we are trying to solve. There are some technical bottlenecks too, but I think this is the bigger one.
I would actually bring in a little bit of a socio-cultural. I'm not sure about the phrase, what it should be, but you see, like with every tech inflection that comes in, even with the last wave of open source adoption and stuff, Indians often tend, Southeast Asians mostly, we often miss out on this entire wave because we cannot adopt it because it comes from a very different social and cultural background. People who have been into cryptocurrencies, which popularized blockchain development, they all come from a very different cultural background, and the products they build also fits in there. But this is where someone from India might have a very, very tough time kind of fitting into this whole situation. Like the people don't understand basic finance, first of all, in India, right? Like basic financial instruments they don't understand, and you shove them into this world of decentralized currency where people have, like, for 2000 years in India never questioned the concept of what even a currency is, because people have just come and like shoved information down their throats, right? So yeah, that's a bigger challenge, I guess.
Yeah, agree. So I have a follow-up question. So what do you think when someone dives into learning a good understanding of how cryptocurrencies work, or how should you invest in cryptocurrencies? Is it necessary to know about cryptocurrencies when you the
So
DApps?
I think you cut off a bit for me. So let me just repeat that part. So are you saying, is it important to know about cryptocurrencies before you sort of start building decentralized applications?
Yeah,
Is
that's
that
what
the
I
question?
asked. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Actually, no. You can have almost zero knowledge. You can ask Aditya is probably the best answer for this because he had no clue about how
Yeah.
cryptocurrency works. He did not have either. As a matter of fact, I think when he won the prize, they gave him in a particular cryptocurrency which is not common. And even though I was trying to guide him, it was like quite a hassle. And I realized that with the previous other cohort that just ended, they're struggling with that too. So let me sort of dial back a bit why cryptocurrency is important in the blockchain, right? So how these protocols work compared to, let's say, AWS or some other infrastructure service, right? So how are we accessing Zoom right now? Let's try to first understand that. Okay, so Zoom is, let's take from the most basics. We are connected all via a client right now, which is, could be a web client, could be their desktop app, or it could be their mobile app, right? They all talk to a server, which is most probably at the moment it tells me I'm being connected from the US server. Okay, great. If you're using the free Zoom, right, who's paying Zoom, right? Nobody's paying. So they're actually doing this like, hopefully that you'll pay for it. But someone is spending on the server side, right? So the fact that we are all connected to this server right now, the bandwidth, the computational cost for this video to be rendered, all of that is through a centralized service, right? So Zoom, I believe, has recently shifted to the Oracle Cloud, but otherwise, I'm guessing they were either on AWS, GCP, or Azure. These are the three biggest infrastructure providers, unless you have your own dedicated web server, which is definitely not my recommendation for a company like Zoom. Now, they are paying, let's imagine they're paying AWS right now. They pay Amazon Web Services for the hosting and delivery, the computational cost. And that is a commodity right now, right? Because Amazon decides this is the fixed price and then they negotiate. But in blockchain, there is no centralized authority, right? So it's like truly what internet was meant to be. Like today, you guys pay for ISP. So I'm going another level down, right? So you actually pay for ISP to connect to a worldwide network. Actually, internet is supposed to be decentralized, right? So we've sort of become more centralized. But if you guys sort of read into things, like there's I think the Internet of History podcast and a book and all of those things that go really deep into how internet was built. That is how we actually access. So we pay for somebody for the service. Now, when it comes to the blockchain protocols, and let's take example Ethereum right now, Ethereum is fully decentralized. There is no centralized party saying this is the cost of doing a transaction. So you could go to a website like ethgasstation.info right now, and you can literally in real time calculate what is the market cost to do a transaction, right? So this is controlled using crypto because we can't have a fiat sort of a currency like US dollars or INR because there is no centralized person taking this payment, right? So all of that is handled through this cryptocurrency. So for Ethereum blockchain, that is controlled through what they call as ETH, okay, which is, it is the Ethereum cryptocurrency, right? So every cost that is involved in storing, managing the network is all controlled through that one currency. So for you to interact with that network, to sync the data, there is no cost. Like you can read of it as long as you connect. It's like BitTorrent. If you guys know how BitTorrent works, everybody, peers connect to a bunch of seeders, then they sync up the data, and then you have the concept of leechers, which do not have the entire data, and they're just sort of pulling it from these seeders. So similar to that, we have concept of nodes. But when you want to participate in the network as a person who's sort of writing to the network, then you need to own ETH. So all of that actually BlockVigil abstracts away. So, we do with Ethereum, and now Ethereum is extremely expensive and unscalable, which is why we have gone with another layer 2 chain. I don't want to go into the, this might be a little complex to explain all that. It's called Matic Network, which is also quite popular in, at least in our, in country and in Bangalore. You guys must have already been aware of them. But there also we cover that cost. So you as a developer is still just talking to it via an API key, right? So we do have paid plans similar to how AWS and all do. So I think that is why you don't have to worry about the cryptocurrency, but it's good to know what's really happening behind the scenes, right? So this is a very, very different paradigm, right? So first you have to truly understand how the internet, cloud, and everything work for you to then understand how blockchain works. So you can't skip that and say, oh, I'm going to be a DApp developer. That's not going to happen. And I think that's where most people struggle.
I think indeed is the best layer 2 solution, which increases transaction speed. So I probably will hand over Aditya the. Aditya, you can continue with these slides.
Yeah.
Yes, can we have?
Yeah, Yash, can we change the slide? Yeah. So just talking about building on something that Anomit just mentioned a couple of minutes back, there's also the socio-cultural challenge as well. So the tech community, once kind of trained, might be able to catch up with blockchain pretty quickly. But what about the non-tech community, which would probably have to also just kind of understand the whole concept of why it is better, first of all, why blockchain is better than the previous centralized system that we have, and also about using it and interacting with blockchain. So what would be the best way to kind of explain to them, especially if I might add slightly older age groups and people who are in the middle-aged and senior citizen category, they might find it especially more challenging. So what about them would be my next question actually.
So usually, like the way I do it with someone from my parents' age group, for example, is the same example I would even teach students of a passbook. Me sending you money, you sending me money. So they are very familiar with the concept of passbooks, right? And so far they have seen passbooks that are given to them by State Bank of India or take any other bank. But then I told them that what if that passbook was done by mutual cooperation among each of that cooperation trickles down. So this is based on like a bottom up model of everyone cooperating and coordinating with each other. And that is truly like, isn't that what you wanted when you first got into participating in democracy, and how you have the voting process, and how, like, how block councils are formed, right, at the very bottommost layer, right? From there you have a constituency, from a constituency you have an assembly, and like that things are actually supposed to be bottom up, you know regular civilized democracy, and that's what blockchain is here to do it. Because unless you decentralize and diffuse out the structures of control to the people at the very bottom, then otherwise it's like still the same top down level of control that's very common in a monarchy, and that's not common in a democracy, right? So for non tech community, especially from the older generation, you have to tell it in terms of the systems they already interact with. And when you introduce a level of decentralization, you have to show them that this is what the original premise of the structures that we currently live in are supposed to be. Blockchain brings it back. It's not taking actually away from you, right?
You're muted.
Adit, you are on mute.
Apologies, I did not realize. So we can, I think, move on to the next question now. So if a young computer science graduate is excited about blockchain and wants to start off, wants to explore it, and wants to understand it better, where do you recommend he or she starts off? And if I may add like a slight follow-up to before this, what is blockchain, the simplest words according to you? And how would you recommend a young CS graduate to get started in this?
So I'm going to give a very biased answer because we are both here. Go check out blockvigil.com and try the tutorials. As simple as that, right? So right now the tutorials, I believe the URL, I'm happy to share them in the chat as well, because we
That'd be great,
built
yeah.
that as a way that anyone who's absolutely new should be able to learn it in those 4 lessons, right? So, and we have seen that. That's the proof we saw in January. You don't even have to be a, like a young CS graduate. You could be a first year, second year student. Aditya has sort of proven that for us. And that's our goal, right? How do we make it better? But right now, if you can sort of go through that, that actually goes into pretty all the concepts that Anomit and me have been talking about. We personally built that, right? So Anomit has spent time not only working with me on that product, but actually coming up with those concepts and diagrams. So this is something we extend in our cohort. So people who have joined in a little later, since Aditya brought up about the bootcamp. So the bootcamp definitely is much more high touch, right? So the problem with bootcamp is we can't be running one every day. So which is why we built the tutorials product, right? So I'll just share that after I speak. And to answer your follow-up question, what is blockchain to so I think that goes back to what I answered in the previous question, right? So the
Yeah.
previous follow that you first, I think you to appreciate blockchain, you need to have a better understanding of computer science and how the web works. Because if you don't do that, I don't think you can truly understand the advantages of blockchain. It might actually just be more overwhelming, and you'll be like, I don't know why I would need this, because it's not the default thing that happens at companies today, right? So because we are so trained in this academic way, learn these things, and then you go to a company, and then you actually find out that everything you learned in academics is also outdated, and then they train you again. So it's
Yeah,
like a forever you're in like a college mode, right? So that's precisely what happened to
true.
me. So I gave that disclaimer in the beginning for that, because I was 16 years old. This is like a long time ago. Like I'm 34 now. So I realized it back then, and internet was not a common commodity, right? I used to have 2 hours of internet access in a day in this campus I left. They used to allow me to go out and access it from a cyber cafe. Most of you probably never experienced that, and I'm very thankful. But that's what got my attention, right? So there was not the regular training that they teach you in college. So the teaching in college, what you need to pay attention to is the CS fundamentals, because I think that is like the building block of how computer science works. But you have to expand beyond that, right? Now we are fully engulfed by web at the moment, right? Like the fact that we are doing this and not in person, and I
Correct.
believe this is going to be the unforeseeable future is going to look like this, is because of that technology. So you cannot ignore that, right? You can't say like your phone, your computer, everything is to that. So you do need to understand that. And then once you sort of understand, then you go into the non-tech aspect, which Anomit talked about culturally, how our society and all work, right? So that's equally important, because it's not just a technology. It's about how the why decentralization is necessary, why accountability, how it works, and how you're going to verify actions of everybody, including the most important aspect of our life, which is the government, which runs, which is responsible for our day-to-day
Right.
life, right? So I hope that was a sizable enough answer. I'll
Definitely.
just share the link after this.
Yeah, definitely. So that was a very, easy to understand answer that I'm sure a lot of people will be able to comprehend. And I hope everyone actually goes on to the tutorials and tries a couple of them just to see and understand what blockchain is about. So moving on to the next question. What do you think is the future with regard to decentralization of data and storage? Because we already know about the giants, the tech giants, Google, Facebook, you name it. And there's been a lot of issue with privacy. So what do you think is going to be the future with regard to decentralization of data and storage?
Okay, so it's not about just decentralization of storage. You got to understand that the computation is also going to get decentralized. So,
Right.
like there won't be centralized in the future. I'm 100% sure. Like you can kind of record me on this, so I'm fine with that. But I'm 100% sure that we are going to lose out on these big cloud providers that have come to be and that have become like gatekeepers of the internet, and that is going to go away because see, all of us are holding devices that hold vast amount of computing and storage power, right, and memory, right. It has all the three things necessary, and all of them just need to cooperate over protocols, and protocols are nothing but automated code rules, right, rules that peers in a participating system should follow. So once you have the guarantee and the transparency from the right responsible people that if things ever come into legislation, things like storage and computing and websites, they won't live anymore on centralized place. Things will get cheaper. More people will have access to computing resources. More people will have access to storage resources, and people on an individual, or forget even individual, maybe on an institutional level, like for example your hack club could earn its own resources to keep itself running, to make itself self-sustaining by renting out whatever resources it has in its own capacity, and in return gain access to a even bigger. It's like a win-win situation if you look at it, and it's a positive sum game instead of a zero sum game where if you access Zoom's resources, you are taking something away from Zoom and not giving anything back to it, right? So that's where things are headed, and it will head there, and it's going to be done by force if possible by a lot of these large companies which have invested into these spaces. Trust me.
Okay, that's definitely an answer a lot of people have to probably think a bit more and wrap their heads around. I also want to ask a follow up to this. Who do you think is going to be the gen that starts this off? Is it like already, you would say 5-6 years is going to happen, or you think we who are still pursuing our computer science, engineering and courses, we could come out there and actually implement it?
So I would say it's already started, right? The way, I don't want to quote certain things that's happening in our country as an example, but you have to think from that perspective. What is the most critical thing that's happening in the country right now? Who's fighting for certain? It's a very small amount of right, a right to go and safely participate in one of the most important examinations, right, in our country. Who's doing that, right? It's the students. It's not the cultural, the authoritarian system that is telling us what to do. People are demanding their rights, right? And this has been
Yeah.
actually, this is in the works. So I would not say it's something that's going to happen. It's only going to get bigger in the next 5 years, right? So the question, to answer your sort of split your question into two parts, is that has it already started? It already has, right? The fact that you yourself are this developer who has sort of built this, and I think you should talk about what you have built. This is a hack club AMA.
Yeah.
So I'm a hacker, right? So I don't consider myself to be a core programmer. I have gone and learned so many new things in my life, And I can just like every day, like literally before this call, I was learning some 2, 3 new things, right? So Anomit focuses more on the thing, but we're both like we love the hacker mentality, right? That's why we built this company, and that's why we want to encourage folks like you. And if it's about just the future of decentralization of data storage and like Anomit said, compute, that's super important too, right? That's already happening, right? So that's one of the things for people to find out is like today. So we deal a bit more on this, smart contracts and things that we're talking about. But when we actually go beyond, is you'll hear more announcements from us as well soon, and you'll see what's happening. There are protocols like Filecoin. There are protocols like SciTech. SciTech has actually been around for 4 to 5 years, as Aditya found out when he was integrating with them. They've been there, right? So now the time is it's gonna switch, and like Anumit said, like all these gatekeepers are gonna go away, right? So now it's only a matter of time because one, people have to demand. Right now, we choose convenience over what's right? Like, so that's
Yeah.
another thing. So we would rather have something that's comfortable. And enterprises also, it's much harder for them to change. Like, so the change that will come in is from younger, smaller companies that are going to get bigger. That's what I want to say. And I think you guys are, the perfect audience for that. Hopefully that answers your second part of the
Yeah.
question.
And also, I think we totally relate with the hacker mentality, and we love that too. Probably can ask a bit more and delve a bit more into that. So I think Abhishek had a question.
Yeah, so even I have a for that I want to make sure is my voice clear.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
go
think
ahead.
your voice is clear.
So my question is regarding digitalization. So as the on blockchain are increasing with the number of users, so where do you think is the miners who want to join in later? So have to clone in a huge data, a lot of data, and plus the what they receive is decreasing as a number of blocks. For in case of Bitcoin, 10,000 probably it is. So after 2 lakh 10,000, the reward is half. So what do you future headed there? So will it still be scalers who are joining, who want to join, who want to come into the mining field?
Okay, I think he was cutting off for me.
Yeah,
So
the audio
I believe
was.
I understood his question, so I'll just repeat that back before answering. Anumit, feel free to chime in because you've also been researching on the proof of stake stuff. So Abhishek, I guess your question is like if someone wants to get into mining and you were comparing it with what's been happening with Bitcoin since it was a profitable mining thing and it's going to go down further and further, which includes for Ethereum and all those things. So we should once take a step back because it looks like you have a bit of a knowledge, but not the entire knowledge, right? Judging from that question. So for the rest of the folks who are on this call, I want to be respectful and not go into something that's completely over our heads. Um, I think, Anumit, did you bring that up about knowing fundamentals of how finances and all work, right? So that's something that we don't learn. So we jump into an opportunity because this is into our cultural thing as well. This includes rest of Asia as well, right? So when we see an opportunity, we try to get in, and that's what you see with not just mining, with also with ICUs and all this. This is what I observed in 2017, and now because this what we call is a bull market that's kind of now back, except I guess in the last 24, 48 hours, there's been a hit. Um, People get into things that they don't understand because somebody has said that you can profit from this. That is the absolutely the worst approach, which is why you have to start with understanding why this is necessary. Are you even capable of sort of doing that? So if you're purely looking at it from a finance perspective, it's a different mindset, right? So one is the builder mindset, and I think the other is the finance mindset, which you have to sort of, you know, treat it differently. So let's just get into now I'm going to just talk about the financial aspect of it, right? So there, what you first mentioned is, I guess, with Bitcoin and whether Bitcoin is mining is no, it isn't. It is not going to be any helpful to be a Bitcoin miner. It already is being questioned about the whole proof of work, the way it works. It's like very expensive. It's not good for the environment. a lot of resources are wasted. So most of the community has been trying to move into something what we call as proof of stake. I believe Ethereum itself, the Ethereum 2.0 is going to be proof of stake. Matic network has its own way of doing the similar proof of stake. So these are things you have to like really research. It's not a very straightforward question on, investing into cryptocurrencies and intention of making profit, because that is actually what we call as trading, right? So trading is very different from building, right? So on top of it to profit from it. So I would say the true value of a network is if you have gone and built a network, you have built a sort of a decentralized app that can actually profit from the value you provide to people is very different from you investing your money because you see that, hey, these are things that actually work. So I think that would be, I don't think Anomit either is, both of us are not finance folks. We don't do a lot of trading. I've done some in the past, and considering I still have to manage some of this crypto for our company, I do have to sort of constantly think on a day-to-day basis. So
Uh,
just to sort of, yeah.
I think his question was specifically regarding Bitcoin mining. And if you want to get into mining, like first of all, you need like insane amounts of hardware, guys. Don't even think it. You can do it on your laptop. Maybe yeah, if you take over your college's lab network or something, you might be able to distribute out the mining tasks or something. But otherwise, like, why are you even thinking down that line? I don't want to sound like I know it all, but why are you even thinking down that line? Because are you going to profit from it? Investment is way too much. And like the whole crazy Bitcoin maximalism is very, very toxic to the entire ecosystem of the distributed and decentralizing and storage that I had mentioned earlier. Like that kind of maximalism has zero space because Bitcoin does not allow you to compose any higher order logic. It's just me sending money, me receiving money. Come on, man. There's more to a decentralized network than that. People have been researching for 30 years on that, and now you're seeing it in action, right? So, whether to answer it technically, like, will blockchain be still scalable primarily Bitcoin? No, 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 no. No, Bitcoin was never meant to be scalable. First of all, it's damn slow, right? And with its insanely, it also suffers from bad and high transaction fees sometimes. I'm sure that has also happened in its history, right? So anyway, Bitcoin network was not meant for scalability. Like, what is there to scale, first of all, right? Like your financial transactions, you wait anyway for some time for things to reflect in your actual bank account. So that doesn't change your life in any one way. So what was the question about? Was it question about the mining getting difficult as a process? It will get difficult. That's how the Bitcoin protocol is designed. Two means your profits will also decline over the long term. The later you get in on the game, the more you have to lose. That's what the maximalists want you, so that their values will continue increasing because they have been longer in the game, and the more people enter it, just like a middle level marketing scheme, the more later entries are there, the more the original entrants uh, stand to gain from that thing, right? So I would say like it's just a direction which leads us to a dead end trying to talk about Bitcoin.
Yeah, and just going back to what I said, so you should then be looking at what most of the blockchain protocols are moving to is proof of stake. That is a completely different way of doing it. You are not investing in hardware at all, right? So then you're actually putting up money against it. There are certain things I don't want to take more time because I think the question we have discussed this more. It is, where you actually start to give up your hardware in terms of storage to be part of that network. So, Filecoin and others are trying to do that. But on a large scale, I would definitely not recommend, like, at least for the Bitcoin question. So.
Yeah, I think there's a strong correlation between with our next question as well, which is about cryptocurrencies. So a lot of people, I think slightly, if I may say, the millennials have had this idea of they can invest in cryptocurrencies and they can make profits pretty quickly, and that's actually very rampantly spread by a lot of people who are into the crypto world. They keep saying that you should do crypto trading, man. That's so much better, etc. So what do you think about making investments in cryptocurrencies with the intention of making profit only? So just that aspect.
So I'll draw a parallel to how stock trading works. Okay. So until an app called Robinhood came in, which by the way is called the Millennial Stock Trading app, so aptly called that, right? Um, that was the same problem. Everybody on this call was not eligible to even invest in stocks. You would, first of all, the the hurdles were so high. You would have to get a demat account, and you have to fund it and all that. So in from that perspective, if you truly treat cryptocurrencies as assets, then investing in cryptocurrencies as assets is much better than investing in stocks in some ways, right? Now, I'm going to give the same disclaimer. Don't invest money that you're not willing to lose, because this is the same thing that goes for stocks too. They can go down because cryptocurrencies are more volatile. The reason for that is there are no, so in case some of you are not aware, the way stock market works, there are timings to the stock market. Like right now, the Indian stock market is not operating. That is not like for the crypto folks is like you can't even think about it, right? Anyone who's only done crypto investing, because this is 24/7 and the market is 24/7. You also don't have things like triggers. Like if the stock goes more than, or rather on the decreasing part, more than 10 to 20%, the trigger sort of locks any further trades for it to prevent from completely crashing. It can still go down to zero eventually in a week, but that's not the case with crypto, right? Like I believe Ethereum and Bitcoin and all have dropped about, Ethereum has dropped about 25% in the last 48 hours. That would not be possible because first of all, the stock market would be closed in India. So that's one aspect of it. You investing in crypto as from a pure like a finance perspective is so much better because you can do it at your time. You could be studying in college and then you could be doing it during your time, right? Like in the evening. So this is something I never got into stock trading because I used to always be busy working during the day. Second, you're fully in control of your assets. Right now, to do stock trading, you always have to use a middleman, right? So what we call is in crypto, you have decentralized exchanges, DEXs, versus centralized exchanges, right? And there's even more now hybrid stuff that you can do. There you're always in control, and plus you can always verify that the stock you own is actually belongs to you. That is not the case with when you actually go into the traditional stock market because your broker holds on to it and anything can happen. Like I know with my father itself, he used to do it casually, and then this brokerage firm went into some, they had some fraud issues. So his stock has been now forever frozen. It's not his fault, but the government has sort of come and taken over that thing. So these are the things, right? So this is the fundamental difference first you have to understand, right? So that way, crypto wins, right? All the check boxes you can think of. Now, when it comes to making profits, I think it's much more volatile. So that means you can either make a lot of money or you can also lose a lot of money. So that's this is what I actually want to sort of say, because beyond this, if I try to give advice, I don't want everybody coming out of this sitting and putting all their, money. And so my only last piece of advice is only invest money that you're willing to lose, right? Like if it goes down to zero, you're totally okay. That's the money you should invest. So don't put your entire pocket money into it.
Understood. I think that's a valuable piece of advice. So I think we can move on to the next question now. Yash, could we have the next slide? So there's something new to learn in the tech world all the time, right? Like the software development life cycle in the tech world is pretty short. A new language comes up, or there's a new, kind of a package developed, a new approach even to develop something, and all of that. All of it requires you to be a quick learner of sorts. You need to be able to adapt quickly and learn pretty fast. So what would you consider as the best way to learn tech stacks quickly, like an approach of sorts, or some tips to keep in mind for young developers who are just getting started?
So see, the thing is like this is like a FOMO thing that's created by this entire software programming industry. Like I didn't touch a keyboard for 6 years. That's fine. Like but do learn event loops, for example, have been around since at least 25 years as a research topic to implement it in so many different languages, right? It's same with parallelism, right? It's been there, right? uh, Whatever is behind web servers. This tech stack is just like one way to do things, which suddenly one community, or if it's a company sponsored language like Erlang or something, it just builds over time. As more people build, that becomes like a standard, and then that grows from there, right? Whether you take Go was pushed by Alphabet, like Google, I think, right? So that was their own developed internal lab developed thing where the founder of C, I think Cunningham, he was involved in the development of Go. Either it was Cunningham or Ritchie, one of them, right? So if you really want to learn something new, know that there are some patterns which will never change, even if you change stacks. So that's what I was trying to get to by talking about concurrency, parallelism, asynchronous behavior, event loops. Uh, the variables, whether it's typed or dynamically typed, doesn't change, right? And what C taught you as pointers, now people have forgotten about pointers. We don't do memory level operations anymore, right? So patterns have actually gotten simpler over the time. So the best way to learn tech stacks quickly is, first of all, know these fundamental patterns which are rarely going to change, right? Message passing, asynchronicity, stuff like that. And the second thing being, now go look into these different projects that are working on these languages, right? Like even if I take the example of blockchain, actually, if you look at the Go Ethereum code base, that's one of the best places to start learning about the language Go and the entire stack of how it's working from a low level networking point of view, P2P messaging, to all the way up till serving that data through a JSON RPC interface, right? So I would have to share that about this specific point.
Swaroop, do you have anything to contribute to this as well?
Yeah, I think we get caught up in all these different stacks and tools and things. As a true hacker, I like to learn a lot of different new things, but also not get caught up in a cult-like attitude that, oh, this is the best tool. No, there's no such thing. We ourselves have more tools and more languages that we use and stacks and further things than we have employees in the company, right? Because we have given that freedom to use the best tool for the trade. So that only comes with experience, right? So I would say until you've garnered that experience, why don't you try out everything, right? Now, not just stick to only software. That's one of the things I think true hackers love, tinkering around with hardware. That is slowly sort of going away because we get all these devices now, which are like, they do everything for us, right? So, and I believe
Yeah.
Hack Club's website, if I remember reading it, in San Francisco, they just hacked something together and, that's what they had ended up building, right? So that is the thing, right? So go and learn everything you can without spending years and years into something and then realizing, oh, this is not what my job wants or something like that. So especially when you're in college, right? Like I think this is the best part of it because you're not under a pressure to make money. Or, I mean, sure, you have assignments and things like that to worry about, but I think there's more than enough spare time that you can dedicate and learn something new every week or so, right? So depending on your bandwidth. And that's what I generally encourage rather than saying, hey, go learn this exact specific thing, right? So hopefully that answers.
Yeah,
Uh,
definitely. And if I may request Anomit, I think you mentioned a few about parallelism and event loops. If you could actually just give us like 3 or 4 for someone to get started, and that can be helpful with anything, like building apps or web applications or anything. The parallels that we could draw and learn about. If you could give like few examples that we can actually go and right after this session, maybe you can read up on that, and that would help us out.
Right. So the links itself, I can maybe send it out to Aditya once I'm done with the session, right? And
That would be
those are
better.
like
Yeah.
my favorite topics too. So I have a few resources, blog posts, other people publishing their GitHub repositories, right? The thing is, like, you have to see your own code in action. That's when you can also judge for yourself whether this tech stack is any good or not, right? And that also means you need to keep having your own ideas and kind of get out of that hello world
Yeah.
mindset I was talking about earlier in the day, right? I will send you some resources, so maybe that might help quite a few people.
Definitely, that'd be amazing. Thanks so much. So I think we can move on to the next question now. So there's also about while we are part of our college and pursuing our engineering degree, we have to do quite a lot of mini projects as well as our final year project as well. So while I think as members of the Hack Club as well as people who are just enthusiastic about tech, we get good ideas, we get developing quickly, and we hack together something really nice. But there is also a few things that go beyond just a working application, like documentation and having probably something like privacy policies, all of those things. So could you give us some tips or best practices that might slip off our mind, but is actually pretty important to submit a high quality project that could even possibly published as an academic paper?
So I'll start off with some very basics, and then Anumit can talk about, the documentation, what is required from a true tech project. So first and foremost, if you're building a high quality project, the most important thing is what you built should work. That's how I like to look at it. You can write the
Nice.
most complicated documentation and paper, and if you haven't implemented it yourself, why would I, at least as a hacker, why would I pay respect to you, right? So I'm like, I'm not going to try this out and do it on my own. Unless you've reached a point or you're really specifically targeting like an IEEE kind of a session, because there it's pure academics, right? So you're really going to research mode. But when I say project, it's always something functioning, right? So that's the most important thing. Um, we tend to sometimes focus on how it looks. Now, that is both good and a bad thing, because we do judge things by the cover. So your first impression needs to be important. Somebody trying it out should instantly like it. But I also say that, given enough time, hackers will respect your product. Like, they are not going to judge you just because your UI is bad, right? As long as your user experience, which is very different from user interface, right? So these are things that I wish I had learned a bit earlier. That needs to be still good, right? It still needs to be like, if I tried something, oh, this looks fun. Now I want to go deeper into understanding, why did you build it? How did you build it, right? And of course, if you have open source code, that I think definitely nails it, right? So I'll let Anumit sort of talk about what are the other aspects of it.
So see, in code documentation is the first step to begin with, right? Like every
Yeah.
possible language and framework out there has these tools which will parse out those comments from inside your code and will build a documentation at the level of class, and then at the level of a module, and then at the level of a whole project, right? This is present in the language and it comes with its own standards, right? So that's the first thing you should follow. Like if you're building a project that people should be able to contribute to or maybe use as a module, you should first start with in code documentation, right? So second would become like if you want to submit a high quality project, you also have to be explain the rationale behind your project, right? This is what I had kind of given to Aditya also as a feedback, like sequence diagrams, right? System architecture diagrams
Yeah.
that explains what's exactly going on behind the scenes, right? Instead of too much of text. And even if you write text just for the documentation purposes, it shouldn't span too many paragraphs. Like we are not reading paragraphs. That has its own place in academic papers, right? So
Right.
yeah, so follow it up on a level of hierarchy. Like first is in code documentation, and maybe even before that comes the good variable names. And you should know what's going on with your own code. If you write something like underscore p, and then like later on someone is looking at your code, or even you're looking at your code and you're not sure what is this variable supposed to be doing over here, right? You don't want to run into those
Yeah.
situations.
True. Yeah. Thank you so much for that. And I just have a personal, a follow-up question, because I personally love graphic designing quite a lot. What would you say about not having boring in a documentations? Because I have personally thought about this often. Documentations are usually just plain text with some sequence diagrams and some certain, infographics maybe. But would you say that is it necessary to have it in that way to add some kind of what do you say, an emphasis on the actual content itself, or do you think just playing around with design, making it look very attractive, wouldn't be a bad idea? Or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, this has been like my dream for many years. This first since I saw Jarvis and Iron Man. Since then I have thought like I should be able to just like navigate between my code, right? I shouldn't be like reading through it like as if I'm reading a 15th century scroll from somewhere, right? It doesn't make much sense because I should be able to shift between different sections of the code, and that should be at my command and not at the command of the documentation itself, right? So yeah,
Yeah.
design navigation is possibly the one thing that will separate out a good code's documentation from a like a average or a poorly done project's documentation. Definitely, you should look into it with AR and all coming in. I think that is a line of work which no one is looking into it right now, but definitely people should. If you can connect code, if you can connect code with documentation and bring it to even more developers who can understand it intuitively, like the possibilities once more are endless, right? Like if you start imagining, you'll see like Neuralink, you start Neuralink, AR, documentation, navigate, you ask something, it comes in front of you. Like you'll think of your work getting so easier then.
It's definitely fascinating and something that strikes our curiosities as well. I think we can move on
So
to the next
I
question.
I kind of wanted to like sort of take a slightly different approach to that too. So you should not
Sure.
obsess on the design part of it because it depends on who your audience is, right? So this is something I have to do sometimes because I have to make sales pitches, investor pitches, and then technical documentation. Three very different
Okay.
audiences. So you should know your audience. If your audience
Mm-hmm.
is like somebody who wants to see something fancy, sure, do all the decking up that we do, right? So, but if you try to target an absolutely technical audience and you throw all kinds of UI around it, they'll get deterred because they're like, where is the actual? Because somewhere there's a balance, right? There's always that balance, which means you have not put
Understood.
much effort on the explanation. So when Anumit meant design and the navigation, that is again the user experience. How well are you explaining your documentation? So that might not do with the how it looks.
Got it. Got it. That's a valid point too. Yeah. I think we can move on to the next question now. Yes. Yeah. So, could you briefly state a few skills apart from programming that a young CS graduate should focus on to really thrive in the tech industry? So, first, I mean, more on the technical side of skills, maybe apart from because programming is something I think a lot of young engineering graduates pick up pretty quickly. And maybe, so, of course, on the soft skills side of things, we have communication, but maybe something that surprised you, a surprise of a soft skill that you had not really expected, but turned out to be pretty important.
I think I'm going to let Anumit handle this because this is his favorite thing we rant about every day at work. So I won't even
Sure.
speak.
I think you should ask this to people who are actually in the tech industry because I don't know. I have not much to add in this regard. Like thriving in the tech industry, I would say just focus on understanding the technical details first, right? Like I know a lot of it right now comes with this whole woke culture that has somehow seeped into the entire the tech industry, if you want to put it, but that's completely orthogonal to what tech came into being as. The tech came into being to reduce the boundaries between people and not have such like you do realize like a lot of people are cut off from the kind of ecosystem we are building, right? So maybe work on getting more people into the tech industry that allows you to develop a lot more connect with regular people which will guarantee your thriving model in a tech industry, right? If your thriving definition of thriving includes being employable, and then you can go down the usual route of just writing in your LinkedIn bio X Uber, X Paytm. That will do the job. Don't worry about that. Just
So yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's the part we fundamentally think is what's going wrong, right? Because we have so many options, right? This, day-to-day stuff too. I'm not just talking about a job, that we have very little effort and focus that we like to put against something. Careers are built by putting sustained amount of effort, right? You have to um, persist, you have to persevere to be able to reach a certain point in life. if you keep jumping from one app to the other because somebody said, hey, this is cool, and then you start doing that to a company, right? Like, and that's, I'm sure some of you, all of you use dating apps too. That's basically what has happened, right? Because it's that culture that is coming into a fact that, oh, we suddenly have so many options. Why do I need to stick with something that I still like? Because I'm going to pick something that seems better. But what ends up happening is you're having a bunch of mini burnouts instead of you properly putting in effort of like a few years, right? So I don't know what's the exact amount of time because it actually purely depends on how much effort you're putting in, right? So you can say that you studied at a college for 4 years, and that may not mean much, right? But if you could study for 2 years and really finish credits, I don't know if the Indian education system allows that, but that's what ends up happening with, outside our culture. So that I think is very important. You need to be able to these are difficult to break into skills, but I think you sort
Right.
of approach them very well. You said communication. So I like to say people skills. It's very, very
Yeah.
important. I think professionally, ethics and like getting excited and then completely dropping it off. So I'll just give a very simple example. Aditya's cohort had 25 to 30 students, and then the next cohort had 40 to 45 students. In the end, both the cohorts only had 5 to 6 people in the end who sort of made it to the final session. And by the way, we don't charge any money, right? It's completely free. We actually help you, so you can actually make some money off it eventually. But what happened there? Because they got excited, and then they realized this is not my cup of tea, or I can go on Coursera and probably do it, and then they come back and like reach out to us saying, "Oh, I wish I could continue in the boot camp." That's because your mind is not focused on what you truly want, and that requires that bit
Right.
of focus. And I think um, that'll come with experience, right? So when I was the same age, I had, I too, as a true hacker, I do get excited by a lot of new things, right? Like new shiny things is what I like to say. But I have something that's my core goal, and I will continue working on that, right? So if you can sort of do that, and
Understood.
I don't know if these are there, and I'm not a psychologist or I've not written books on these things. So this is my general piece of advice, and you will thrive in any industry, not just tech.
Got it. And I think Abhishek over here unfortunately has connectivity issues, but one of his questions, which is very much relevant to this as well, was about just switching the tech part with the blockchain itself. So what should a blockchain enthusiast, of someone who really wants to shift the paradigm and like make some changes, what mentality or approach or skills should he have? And a follow-up to that would be, what should be like, would the industry really accept a fresher as a blockchain developer? Is that happening right now, and is it possible to actually get a job, land a job as a blockchain developer?
So you can replace that with tech or anything else. And I think the world has now reached a point, there's no concept of fresher or any of those things. It's your ability to do something. Same way when, we approached you, this was after spending a whole month, right? So we had that advantage. I think that's a little difficult when you're applying somewhere, right? Because if you're like reaching out to a company, they don't know, right? They have no context. So the best way is to solve all of this is to spend time in a certain ecosystem and prove your skills, prove your commitment. These are two very important things, right? So if you're not committed, they will know. Like if you're just going to be like, oh, I'm going to do all of these things and then not deliver, the company
Yeah.
immediately knows. Or the institution or in the network, right? The blockchain ecosystem works in the similar way. We have given 2.5 years of our dedicated time into this right now, as simple as that. And that's nothing compared to the years I've spent into something else in the past, right? And then people are slowly starting to see, oh, this is not like there is something here, right? So that is this, it applies for everything. I would not say, it's about blockchain or any of those things. So, and in, like, I think the bigger challenge that you face as like a fresh graduate is because you don't have that experience. I believe you can build the experience
Yeah.
while you're in college itself. What is stopping you from interning or like working with open source projects where you don't have to intern, right? You can just contribute to something. And you're building I like to call it like, like I don't look at resumes. I build a resume on an interview call. Like I literally ask them, what are the things you've built? And I always ask them not your GPA. Like that's the last thing I think I've never asked that because I absolutely hate that concept that I'm going to judge you based off your how much you scored in an examination. It's great if you've scored a great GPA, but have you done anything apart from that, right? So that is the differentiating factor, because what differentiates you from millions of folks who are graduating every day, right? Or every year for that matter.
Understood. Thank you so much for that, Swaroop. I think that was very insightful, because there's always that fear, I would say, maybe as a student, that while you haven't stepped out, you just kind of are made to believe, even by the society, that you're not qualified enough. So
Yeah, that's also what I have. I mean, I continue to face 18 years later. So when I was an entrepreneur at 16, there was
okay,
no concept of startups. There was no, I think my family thought I was dealing in drugs because I had a profitable business. I paid for my own education. Okay. So I think it took a while, like it's okay, that's just culturally, it's just how it is, the society. So you can go and change that, right? And I think you can,
yeah,
in today's world, it's much easier because nobody's telling you what to do. You're already all connected to your peers now. Unfortunately, I was not connected to somebody like Anomit until we landed in Manipal, right? So internet was
yeah,
not a like, and I think that's why I say that internet is the most powerful thing. It can be the worst thing that can happen to you, or it can be the best thing, right? So if you can sort of look at that angle, you don't have to worry about what the society thinks. But at the same time, don't get into this deep woke culture. You think that I'm going to win the world with emojis. I'm sorry, that'll all get cancelled out very quickly, because that's very easy to replicate, right? Like that's all I'm
right.
saying. Do that, right? Like because you're questioning the status quo, but at the same time, I think you have to take advantage, right? And you have to. I'm not saying you have to compete with each other, but you can collaborate with each other and build something.
Absolutely. I think that's what this question right now. So what's your take on the unnecessary implementation of blockchain tech to the use cases which can be easily solved by conventional tech?
I mean, that's a worded question to make it look negative, honestly, because that shouldn't. So the problem is this exists in tech too. People go about doing things that are really not necessary, which can be solved without tech as well. So I don't think it's about unnecessary implementation of blockchain tech, but more about you're not truly using blockchain. You're just using blockchain because you want to put a buzzword in your offering. That's actually the most simplest answer to it. So I'm not going to pick which ones are these use cases, because it's the people are the judge of it, right? The society, or the market in that manner, the one who pays for it, decides if this is needed or not. But these questions came for the cloud too. So I will tell you that what looks unnecessary and unconventional becomes conventional later on. So it can become. So that's why I said the question could be worded slightly differently. But I hope that answers it, Anurag.
Yeah, I think
Anumet, you
that
had.
was a
I think, yeah, there are a bunch of these. There are some, of course, they're doing it like a snake oil salesman. Just add block. This was my joke in 2017, 18. Add blockchain, AI, ML, and then just sell anything. People are doing a bunch of random stuff back then. Yeah,
That is
I
still the
think
case with AI, right? If you guys think about it, I
yeah.
was interested in AI in the 90s, and all I had access to was books and stuff, and I was trying to understand what Anumet talks about Jarvis and all. They date back. So there has been decades of that. Blockchain has barely been around for 1 decade, right? Total, this is like, I can call it the second decade, but it is the first decade of that tech, right? So you
yeah.
will see people taking advantage of it as well. But anyway, we can move on to the next one.
All right. Yes, I think it would be next. So this is a question about the Matic Vigil product that we announced recently. So why Matic? Why not any other chain? And after EIP 1559, won't need for Matic decrease? I think it's a slightly technical questions, but
So
we can
I'll
Yeah,
see.
yeah.
let, yeah.
I'll take it up. Yeah. Yeah, all right. Why Matic? Why not any instant? There's only so much we can support. That's point number one, right? Like, of course, we can launch it. And yeah, composability, by the way, is one of the defining uh, criteria for most blockchain-based development platforms that are going to come up in the near future, and we're working on supporting that, right? And Matic, for example, right now happens to be the most accessible tech in terms of layer 2 solutions because they implement something like a modified version of uh, protocol called Plasma. I wouldn't go further deep into it. And then he has mentioned something called EIP 1559. So this basically says to, I think this proposal specifically talks about allowing certain pre-compiled contracts with cryptographic operations that takes away a lot of computational power away from gas fees and allows a lot more complexity. And that exactly EIP 1559 is going to enable things like near protocol. If you are interested, look into it. Near protocol is working very, very hard to do a Ethereum to near bridge. So basically near protocol works really fast, and the Ethereum near bridge is going to make it seamless, as if when you work on near, you can access the same state data from Ethereum, and from Ethereum you can access this data of near, and that's what EIP 1559 is going to do. So that's a good question. Yes, need for Matic or any other layer 2 solution might decrease, but what if Matic itself comes up with this composability? You understand, right? A lot of these layer 2 chains will come up with their standard composability. So Matic to Ethereum bridge, near to Ethereum bridge, take any other layer 2 to Ethereum bridge, they'll all follow the same composability standards once EIP 1559 comes in. So it will again become another free market. We are no more there to dictate terms whether the need for Matic or any other layer 2 chain will decrease, right? So anyway, it is early to tell, and even if it comes into being, I only see it being good because now more layer 2 projects will compete with their own token economy, and that will get more developers on board building fast apps, right? And better for BlockVigil.
So
Understood.
what I wanted to give the simplest answer is Matic mainnet is already live. So this is the fundamental thing people don't understand because they're like, which is the best chain? We as BlockVisual, we are actually agnostic. Our job is to give developers the interface, right? So you can talk to blockchain. Behind the scenes, we can switch over, like something that you personally saw, how we let you switch from the Ethereum, one of the
Right.
test nodes, to Matic with just changing one string. That's it, literally.
Pretty
Everything
much.
else was like
Exactly.
the same, right? So that's our goal. It actually does not matter. It's not about why Matic or why not any other chain. We actually have support for other chains. Our recent launch with Matic, the crucial part was because they have gone mainnet. Now, when you go mainnet, there is a network associated with it. There is a adaptable part of it, which is not something with things we can't talk about, which is about to happen. So we don't know what will the effect of 1559 will be. And then it still has issues of Ethereum. Like you still have to worry about the scale of transactions, all those things, and each of the chains will support. So like it's more of a timing thing that we do, and for us, the timing actually worked out very well by the time we had been talking to the Matic team and them launching. So we went live with it. But yeah, you will expect more and more chains connected to us. There will not be one winner. I don't agree with that.
Understood. I'm sure that answers Raghav's question as well. It was very easy to understand. I think we can move on to the next question and slide. So do you have any guidance that you could give us related to first internships and even freelancing? Because freelancing is something a lot of students are very passionate about, because when you pick up some skills and get pretty good at it, there is, and it's pretty easy as well right now to freelance. But I think there are certain, apart from the skill itself, there are certain things that we might need to know about. So any tips on that?
So I actually did start out as a freelancer uh, before I got into. So I was much younger that way, and I remember doing my first job for like peanuts because I didn't know the value, right? I was just super happy that I got paid so much money. But in today's world, I think I charged 1% of my fee back then to do that work. And that's the challenge with freelancing, because freelancing, you have to build up this portfolio, right? This applies to non-tech too. If you're a designer, you have to sort of make your portfolio of designs. to be able to then ask for more money and get better clients, right? So I think freelancing takes that initial bit of hit, so you can get lucky and probably freelance with a company. So maybe first we can discuss the difference, right? What is the difference between the internship and freelancing? Freelancing means specifically you actually have more than one client, has to be there, right? So you can't
Yeah.
say, oh, I only have one dedicated client, I'm a freelancer. That's just a technical, uh, sort of a technicality where you're not employed by the company. Okay. But true freelancers, because they will always have multiple clients and you're just sort of balancing your work out. Internships are purely dedicated because you are loyal to that company. You're not doing anything else. I mean, you could be doing spare things, but you will not have two internships at the same time, right? So
Right.
you're attached to the company and you actually get to learn a lot because freelancing, you're purely doing requirements. You're doing you're working and you're giving the deliverables. So I don't know how much you learn there, but you get a lot of you get paid better. You probably be working on production level systems. Internships can be sort of very, very varied. So I don't know which one is better. So I'll let you guys sort of choose which one, whichever makes you happier. In terms of guide to starting up with either of those things for internships, yeah, the best thing is reach out to the companies. They're always happy to sort of um, I don't know about the paid unpaid thing, that can be a little tricky. But at the moment, you should make sure when you reach out to an internship for a company, you're actually getting some work done and you're not just sitting and learning deep into some research because then you don't get that experience, right? You ideally want that
Okay.
internship to become a full-time gig, right? Because that's the best investment of your time. Um, and if it's freelancing, I would say don't try to get your first clients through pure word of mouth and all because there's a lot of to and fro that will happen. So I would ideally advise you to go and use a platform which sort of acts as a middleman. As much as I'm, from a blockchain perspective, you kind of don't want a middleman, but you should because you want to be protected early on, right? You don't want to worry about the money aspect. You don't want to worry if they try to cheat you or something happens, right? So there's Upwork and all these. I don't know the Indian specific platforms, but I'm guessing Upwork can also help you with that. Fiverr also is a thing, but I think that's very cheap quality. So you kind of want to avoid that unless you're doing very minimal work. But yeah, so this is my advice. But Anumit.
If you're speaking about internships, like usually all internships I have gotten is because I used to hang around in these developer chat channels. I would just like ask questions almost 16 hours I'd be on those channels, and that's how they saw that it's just a person who is actually working with whatever tech they have, and they only reach out with offers, right? So always remember it's
Right.
better to step your own game up and expect the offers to come your way than. So this is like on a risk mitigation kind of strategy. These are like asymmetrical outputs, right? So you're spending like hours building, developing, learning, chatting with other people. When the payoff time comes, it's way higher than you losing your precious time, focus, energy in chasing after many different internships. Don't make your life about chasing internships or chasing a certain job. Step your game up. So in that process, you'll come across opportunities, and those will be much more reliable, and the respect you'll get will be much better. And you will have much better co-workers, seniors, mentors. It'll come, right? It will come. Just focus on learning, building, and staying connected with learned people.
Understood. Thank you so much. I think that's pretty helpful because that's one thing always on our minds. I would say a lot of our students, internships as well as freelancing. Another thing that's
So
always
like if you're partying every weekend, and like if you're having a very relaxed lifestyle, then don't expect internships to come your way when you go chasing them, right?
absolutely, yeah,
It's the same way even when you're out dating. If you haven't dated for 5 years, if you suddenly start chasing someone, they're not going to just suddenly come for you, right? There's no way to verify if you're a good person or a bad person. There's no track record of you being known, right? Like why
yeah,
why would you why would you be given an opportunity, right? Why would someone take a chance on you. So yeah, just be a better person. No? It's much better that way.
Definitely, yeah, I think consistency is what would help a lot. And another thing that's always on our minds at Hack Club as well is about hacking, right? About hackathons, winning hackathons, and giving our best shot at winning hackathons is something we talk about amongst ourselves all the time, about ideas, about approaches, about anything that could interest as well. So, just a couple of tips from you people about how we can approach hackathons, and essentially what have you found to be the most important part, the teamwork, maybe how it is important to have a good understanding between the team, as well as the presentation side of things. Any tips and any inputs would definitely be something that we would be interested in.
So I think it's always good to participate in hackathons whenever you get a chance, because you're always learning, right? So especially if it's a shorter hackathon, because in a burst you can build something. You don't have to think about it for a long time. But from another perspective, I feel like a lot of folks struggle because they try to keep coming up with new ideas, and you're not sustainably like, what after the hackathon, right? Like, I think that's the one question. And Aditya, you should be this is something you should be telling us, because we face this as a challenge for the students that we are helping through a boot camp, right? Like, should they work on another idea, or because what if they don't win the prize? Does that is that a not a good enough incentive to work after this? So I think that's mostly where most people struggle when they try to build things. And when you constantly build things, so you have the advantage that you're learning, you're building all these new things and you keep learning. That's great. But when you keep building new things and you're not like pushing beyond that initial stage, then you don't
Right.
make it into a real business. So I think that's one of the things, right? So it's a sort of a business versus an hacker question. So it's very difficult to answer. What
Yeah.
can you optimize for? And you have to sort of trust your gut. And that's what I generally do with my ideas. So they're not hackathon ideas, but yeah.
Understood. Anomit, do you have something to add on as well?
Uh, yeah, pretty much that, like the teamwork and everything. Like what I would like to see is when you're coordinating, it's not just that my coordination will end with you after 2 weeks. Then with such a short time frame, it becomes like difficult to build something that's going to last for a while or is going to give you some sort of recognition. Like I guess that's what people want. It's not just the hackathon prizes, right? If your project doesn't become a
Right.
usable entity after the hackathon, then you kind of lost that time. If you really look at it, right, you just lost that time into an effort that's not going to come back. Why don't we look at it that way? If you're going to put in time and that burst of energy into something, also think a little bit further ahead, right?
Right. Got it. So I think we can go to our next question. I think it was there previously. Yash? Yeah. So about startups, right? Now, tech enthusiasts obviously we just spoke about ideas, and probably through hackathon itself, if you have a really solid idea and you even have a solid team to pursue it forward, sometimes that might not be good enough, right? There might be certain other things that you need to be aware of. And you could in fact be tricked into not knowing about, if you don't know about these things. So some of the business and funding aspects or anything else, key aspects that we should know about before getting into the realms of a startup or anything of that sort, or maybe even just a pilot project.
So this is a very heavy question, and the one I answer probably the most, because all of my friends, it's not just you guys, right? My peers who keep thinking, can they take the jump, right? Because so let's start with first, like at this stage, right? Somebody who hasn't jumped into the tech world, somebody who's a student
Yeah.
still. So I'm going to then go from student to a fresh graduate, because I feel like there is a tiny bit of a difference there. Okay, someone
Okay.
who's still a student in college, you have the absolute amount of time and least amount of responsibility. for you to take a
Yeah,
plunge into something. You have almost nothing to lose whatsoever.
true.
Okay. So I'll just use this point and then I'll sort of correlate and then we'll get to the answers. So, and then when you're a fresh graduate, the challenge now is you have peer pressure, you have pressure from society. Hey, did you get a job? And then your own parents, right? Because they've
Yeah,
invested money into your education, because this is not the case outside India. Because what happens is most of them are spending their own money or they're working jobs before they even get into college, right?
right.
I actually told my parents once, like, why didn't you kick me out of the house so that I could go learn, or like maybe go to the army and actually learn some life skills before coming there. If you know, right, like these are essential parts of most people turning about 18, 19. It's not some, or you just suddenly become an adult. I completely disagree with that, right? And you jump
Yeah,
into college. And so you're sort of following along a sort of a path which has existed for decades. And I think that's changing, right? So now a fresh graduate has the biggest challenge because you've just graduated. So you have a lot to lose because there's so many opportunities, right? Can I go for the best job? Can I start a new company? I still think it's much better than doing 5 or 10 years into an industry. Now, the other way to look at it is you have no savings whatsoever, right? So how do you take this plunge?
yeah,
Somebody with like maybe few years of experience on savings can probably take that hit. Their challenge is their lifestyle change, right? Because you have to take this. And so maybe the most common answer is you may not know that starting a company and running a business is just, it's a grind. It's like a marathon. You cannot just run 100 meters. No, it's like and it's a constant marathon. I have been running this and I was not as fit as I am right now. So physically, mentally, I've struggled through this for years and years. And I continue to do so because this is what makes me happy. You might realize 2 to 3 years later that it doesn't make you happy, which is completely okay. Don't let somebody else tell you what's right for you. You know, like people saying, I'm going to counsel you and saying this is the right career path. How do you know that when you're 21, 22? You are just fresh out of college, right? And especially when you're 18 or 19, you're just like gone out of your home for the first time. So I think those are things you first need to be very, very clear about. Now, when it comes to starting a business, this is where hackers like us struggle because we are builders. Businesses are all about making money, right? It's all about selling. If I was given sales lesson when I was 18 or 19, I would have done so much better in life because I had to learn this all the hard way. I still enjoy coding or hacking more than like selling. Like this week, Anomit knows how much I've been like sitting through nights. Even today, I was up till like 6 or 7 in the morning, just doing that, right? Because I'm trying to work on the business aspect. But what I enjoyed waking up to was like I knew that I'm going to work on some tech stuff just before this AMA, right? That's the joy that it gives me. So that I don't think you know that until you've taken the plunge. So you kind of have to. And I'm very scared to give that advice to somebody who's just out of college because then the parents' expectations and all can be gone for a toss. You might work on something for 2 years and make absolutely no money. Are you ready for that? If the answer to that is yes, then take the plunge. And you actually may not be experienced enough to give that answer, right? So which is why I say that student hackers, you take part in a hackathon, then you're very lucky if you win and you can actually turn that into a business because you have very low risk. And then comes the funding aspect and all of those things, right? Because that's all about networking, which is what I've been saying all along. Take advantage of your time, build that network out. It's not about investors. It's actually about knowing peers in the industry who can then vouch for you that, hey, this guy knows something. So tomorrow, Aditya, if you go on to, start a company, like I know we have only known each other for 2 3 months, but I can at least give us some sort of a recommendation that, okay, I know this guy. And then somebody in my network will be like, they'll skip that initial due diligence, like that's the part,
right.
which is my life too. I'm sitting and just building my network. Someone somewhere is going to get connected and tell me that, oh, okay, I know you from somebody else, right? So that's what the whole world works to. True funding and things like that, I feel like we don't have much time to sort of go into the deep aspects of it. Right now, focus
Sure.
on building something that people want. Very important. This is
Correct.
what Paul Graham says, and I think it's a very common quote. If you can sort of do that, even if it's your friends first, and then eventually if it's people who would want to pay for it. By the way, this is a very hard thing, okay? Something we have struggled to. We have not charged for our service. So I don't want to be this like super qualified person to be able to say this, but today we do, right? We have figured out. So ours is a much longer journey. You guys can take quicker journeys to iterate quickly and get to that.
Understood. And actually, I'm interested in knowing a bit more about the networking aspect that you mentioned. What you have found to be the quickest way, because some people in the tech world don't like the small talk, and at the same time, some people actually thrive on the small talk and really go for that. So, what's the right approach in your opinion?
It's actually,
Empathy. Try to put yourself in their shoes.
Okay.
If you cannot, some people are assholes, some people are nice. And if your imagination does not include 50% of the population, which is assholes, you're going to get fooled quite a few times, right? That also happens with a lot of founders, right? They get shitty deals,
Right.
they fall into bad business partners. Happened with everyone who has tried to start and found their own companies, right? So calibrate, like that's where the different human skills come in. It's not just about tech after that. There's a little bit of arm twisting that goes on, some shady practices, and yeah, like how do you think Reliance does not get caught by the CCI, right?
Right.
Like they can show it legally. Okay, so get that into your mind, right? Like that's where you'll get to see the real colors of everything. It's not so black and white, and you have to step and calibrate accordingly.
Got it. So I think that sort of brings us to the end of most of the questions that we did have. I guess the
There's one
participants, if they have
question,
any,
right? Out of
sorry.
context question. There's an out of context question in the chat. Abhishek is asking that what are the views on quantum computing being a threat to blockchain? The encryption algorithms will be upgraded as well. There are quantum resistant algorithms as well. When first they were being developed in 2014-15, like Ethereum, SHA-3, not SHA-3, but the predecessor of SHA-3 called Kachak. That was the standard back then, and quantum uh, computing was not so much of a reality back then. Once, like I'm sure something got published just like 2-3 days ago, which would actually break all of your existing encryption standards. But at the same time, that would just bring in those quantum resistant algorithms into the picture. That's it. Just swap it out.
Got it. So apart from that, I think we are done with most of the questions on the PPT. We will keep the chat open for more questions. In the meantime, we have some, kind of maybe small talk, fun questions of sorts that we would like to know a bit maybe on the lifestyle and your thought process and all of that. So my first question is about what are your favorite YouTube channels or tech podcasts that you always end up watching and, maybe you binge watching for a long time.
so podcasts. So I have so many. I actually have not been able to keep up with them since I've been back in India because I don't walk anymore and I don't commute anymore. So that's something I used to do. So I do it during my showers now. But just going with this question itself, since we have this on our slide right now, there's something called The Pitch. It's by Gimlet Media, which is now acquired by Spotify.
Okay.
It's called The Pitch, right? So that is a great way to see. It's not like Shark Tank because it's not like it's for mostly for tech companies and all to come and pitch their ideas. I guess they do it in person, but there's like a few judges and they're investors and they pitch their idea, and that's a very good way to like listen. And I have learned a lot even with my experience. What do people listen for? And there are all these different ideas, right? So you get to hear about it, you get to think about it. What are the things you need to be ready for? Since we are on that topic, rest of it, I look at um, masters of scale. There's like non-tech stuff too. There's so many of them. Maybe I can share them. I
Yeah,
do have
that'll
something
be
to get
amazing.
to in 4 minutes. That's why I want to be wary of time. If there are any other questions. Otherwise, we are happy to answer them over email as well. I think Anomit
Got
wants
it.
to send a few links. So
Yeah, sure. We will include it. We'll be uploading this on the YouTube as well, and we'll add to the descriptions as well. We'll just once quickly go through the chat maybe for any questions. Anomit, would you like to talk about a bit about what media and do you consume for the tech and other things that you're interested in?
For me, I don't consume so much actually. Like, I don't like to be stimulated so much by too much information because anyway, I have to learn quite a few things as part of my work itself, you know. So there itself, I get to learn.
Okay.
And because Swaroop is here to handle the business side of things, right? And he follows the podcast that he mentioned, right? Growing businesses from a founder's perspectives, working with investors, different sort of VC firms. So I'm not too much into that kind of material because I want to stay focused on what I do. But one of the things that I sometimes follow is the Lex Friedman podcast. It was earlier called the AI podcast, and he has invited. If you do not know about the podcast, you should check it out. He has invited like the who's who of computing, artificial intelligence, electronics into his show, and he himself is a professor at MIT. I think in the autonomous driver technology, some department. I'm not sure about that, but yeah, Lex Friedman. You can check out check out that thing. So bigger overarching questions about even philosophy and the morals behind computing. That's also answered in that podcast. Like they have podcast episodes with Elon Musk. They have podcast episode with I think with Alan Moore was also there. So all these names they have come on this podcast, and I get to listen to them talk about the higher order aspects of the work they do. So that's what I'm mostly interested in, and that's the kind of content I usually consume, which itself is not much.
That's actually pretty fascinating. I think we can put in links for all of that for our viewers to later on check out. But this has been a really insightful session for all of us here at Hack Club. And thank you so much, Swaroop and Anomit, for joining. I think it's almost time, so we can wrap up with this. It's been great. We've had a lot of questions were answered. We understood so many more things, and hopefully we can actually implement them and not just consume the all the inputs and tips and just set it aside, but actually implement them and become better coders and engineers as well. So thank you so much, and I think
yep. Thanks everyone for the questions as well. Thanks for
Thanks,
having us.
guys. It was a great interaction. Yeah.
Thank you.